Hey kids, thanks for joining me in the garage again. Today we're going to be going through how to bleed the brakes on the 99 4Runner, though this method is easily adapted to any vehicle's brake system. There are several ways to do this, but I'll show you today how to do this by yourself for when you don't have a helper available in the garage to press that brake pedal. Remember to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's do some wrenching. Before we go over to the truck, let's take a look at the tools we'll be using to get this job done. First, we'll need a 10mm line wrench in order to open the brake bleeder where the brake fluid and air will come out of the system. The 10mm is just the 4Runner's size, so it might vary depending on what vehicle you're doing. Since we're going to be removing brake fluid out of that bleeder, we'll also want to be sure to have some extra fluid on hand to replenish the master cylinder. This is .3 brake fluid that the 4Runner takes. Then to be able to do this by yourself, you'll need a tool like this Mityvac vacuum pump. This is model MV8000. This is so you can get a vacuum on the brake line so you can draw out fluid from the bleeder along with any air from the brake system. If you ever felt that mushy brake pedal while driving, that's because there's air in the brake lines, which is compressible, whereas brake fluid is not. So that mushy feeling in the brake pedal is just the air compressing in the brake line rather than that fluid that is, not compressible. We're going to be removing, by bleeding the brakes, all that air that might be in the brake lines. Of course, that assumes you don't have a leak somewhere, but finding a leak in your brake line is a topic for another video. The order of which brake caliper or cylinder to bleed is also important. For the 99 4Runner, the factory service manual recommends starting with the front passenger side wheel, then the front driver's side wheel, and then finally the rear brakes. It doesn't mention which side of the rear brakes you should start with, but it says rear brakes. This may seem counterintuitive to the old adage of working from brake caliper or cylinder that's the farthest away from the master cylinder and then towards the closest. But this is due how the ABS system functions in the 4Runner. In the engine bay, the ABS system is located farther away from the master cylinder, and so how those brake lines run is a little different. That order that you have to do this in on your vehicle is probably a little bit different, so make sure to check the service manual for the order you should perform this procedure on your brake system. Just, read the effing manual, right? I'll be showing you how to bleed one of the rear cylinders on the 4Runner, but this process can be applied to the front calipers as well as any other brake system on most other vehicles. It's pretty much the same all around. So now that we've gone over all the tools and talked a little bit about the process we're going to perform, let's go over to the truck and we can get started. To start, we got the hood open here so we can take a look at the master cylinder. When you're bleeding brakes, you're effectively removing fluid from the system, so you want to keep an eye on the total level of brake fluid you have. So typically this can be found with some sort of level indicator on the master cylinder reservoir. On the 99 4Runner, on the side of the reservoir, you can see here the max and min line. So you just want to make sure your fluid doesn't go below this minimum line. As it gets close, just top it off with the appropriate brake fluid for your system. On the cap, at least most spots, you'll be able to see, it says use only .3 fluid on this one. So to help with bleeding the system, at least in the method we're going to be using today, you'll want to crack open the master cylinder fill cap, just kind of leave it open there. So help make it a little easier for our vacuum pump to draw out fluid in that it won't have to fight against the vacuum inside the master cylinder reservoir here. So now that we've gone over keeping the fluid topped off, let's go into the cap. So here we are in the cab of the truck. We need to be able to create pressure in the brake system so that when we're bleeding the caliper or cylinder, we're moving fluid through the system. To do that, before we start the bleeding procedure, we're going to be pumping and holding the brake pedal. It's recommended in the factory service manual that you do this up to 40 times, but I found that you don't necessarily need to do it that many times. I think the factory service manual assumes that you're starting out with a completely dry system. In our case, and in most cases, it won't be necessary to do it that many times. I'm using this ice scraper here that I've used and abused over the years. It fits perfectly where I can use it, the head of it against the brake pedal here after scooting the seat up a little bit. So let me, I'm gonna go ahead and pump it a few times here. And we'll scoop this forward. If you have a helper, you can have them do this for you. Come sit up in the front seat. But today I'm doing this on my own, so that's why I've got this little ice scraper. As you make the rounds to each corner of the vehicle, bleeding the calipers or cylinders, you may need to come up here and pump and hold this brake again. Typically, I'll do this a couple of times for each caliper or cylinder as I'm bleeding them. Also, don't forget to double check your fluid level at the master cylinder. With that done, let's go under the truck and start the bleeding process here. Here we are at the rear driver's side of the vehicle. On the 4Runner here, the rear has brake drums, so we're going to be bleeding a wheel cylinder. Though I've said previously, this process is the same on a caliper as well. The first thing to do is you get the hose from your vacuum pump kit onto the bleeder. So you can see this spot right here. That is the bleeder valve. There's a little piece of plastic here, a little cap that you gotta get off there just with the little screwdriver. Set that aside there. And so you gotta get the hose out on there. And so depending on the size of the hose, you may wanna get a line wrench on there first. This one here, that's what I usually do. So let's get that on there. And then you can see with this hose here, I've kind of got, you know, a little step down, you know, that goes down, and then an extension on there as well. So this will go down to the little catch can, and then the catch can connects with another piece of hose to the vacuum pump. So let's get this on here. And it is a tight fit. There. Okay, and so the next thing, this little catch can, on the cap, you'll see there's a 2 pump and then 2, it just says 2 pump, so that's the side you want to put the pump on. So I have another little piece of tube that then goes on there, that then goes to our pump here. So let's get that put together as well. And then we'll get this hose on the other side of the catch can. And then before we start here, we're going to give this a few pumps, make sure we got a good seal on that. You can see the needle pretty well staying there. We've got pressure in the system, so now it's just a matter of cracking this bleeder line. There you go, and you can, don't know if you can see fluid coming out there. Just a matter of keep on pumping here. You can kind of see the bubbles in there coming out. Just keep on pumping that handle. You can see it'll slowly go down as the vacuum comes down on it. So I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and set this bleeder, go ahead and crank it back down, and then go pump the brakes a little bit more as well. All right, pump the brakes a little bit more. Get that vacuum back up there. And then crank this valve. So you can still see, yeah, so there, you can kind of see a few bubbles. You can tell there. But I think that is actually, you know, when you, depending on where you have this bleeder valve set to, you could be coming in through the threads. So you know what, I think that looks pretty good. And another way you can tell too is when you go and stomp on the brakes, instead of feeling that squishy, it's going to feel a lot better. So I'm going to go do that real quick. All right, I went up front there and checked those brakes and they all seem really good. So I think we're done here. Well, I hope you learned something from this video. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it and put a comment down below if you have a suggestion. If you're watching this channel for the first time, consider hitting that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Keep on wrenching.